Tariffs on Canada and Mexico imposed by President Donald Trump took effect at midnight, and they are already having an impact on our nation's economy.
6 people from multiple countries have been arrested after trying to illegally cross into Canada from the U.S.
Cross-border shoppers say they're suddenly facing a new interpretation of the rules.
Although it is the world's longest undefended border, is it truly as peaceful as it appears? Cold War spy games, secret smuggling routes, and forgotten conflicts can be found beneath the serene landscapes. How has this enormous frontier influenced history in ways we could never have predicted? And what mysteries does it hold? The longest international border in the world, spanning 5,525 miles from the Atlantic to the Pacific and well into the Arctic, is the border between the United States and Canada. It does not have armed patrols, military checkpoints, or tall walls like several well-known borders have. Rather, it is characterized by lakes, forests, and vast open landscapes. This border, however, conceals secrets of espionage, smuggling, territorial disputes, and unforeseen tensions that have molded history behind its seemingly tranquil exterior. Centuries of fluctuating political boundaries are the origin of the border. Initially, colonial powers like France, Britain, and later the United States contested the area. The newly established United States and Britain engaged in territory claims negotiations in North America following the American Revolution. Although an initial boundary line was established with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, 1783, which put an end to the revolution, it was still vague and controversial in some places. Although a number of treaties were eventually used to define the border, the 49th parallel was essential in determining the ultimate demarcation. The line that forms the border between Canada and a large portion of the western United States was formed by this arrangement, which was ratified in the Oregon Treaty of 1846. This was a significant historical event, since it signaled the end of long-running conflicts and the start of a more stable partnership between the two countries. Despite sporadic disputes, the border was essentially established by the early 20th century. The United States and Canada strengthened their alliance during World War II by working together on defense issues, exchanging intelligence, and constructing military facilities. The border between the United States and Canada appears to be quiet, yet both nations have security threats. Illegal alcohol trade used the border as a major conduit during Prohibition, 1920 to 1933. The border served as an economic lifeline for the illicit liquor industry as bootleggers brought alcohol into the United States from Canada. Large tracts of land, particularly those around lakes and forests, made it simple for smugglers to avoid detection. This underground market thrived in spite of the law enforcement efforts, highlighting the difficulties in maintaining control over such a vast and difficult border. The border was not impervious to espionage and covert activities throughout the Cold War. In addition to monitoring possible Soviet agents crossing the border, the United States and Canada joined the Western Intelligence Network run by the CIA and MI6. The use of spycraft during this time highlighted how crucial it was to secure information that could be used by foreign powers, in addition to regulating physical movement across the border. One instance of the strategic significance of the border during the Cold War era was the establishment of the DEW line, Distant Early Warning Line, in the 1950s, which ran the length of Canada and was designed to detect any incoming Soviet bombers. Notwithstanding its historical background, illegal activities such as drug trafficking and people smuggling continue to flourish along the U.S. Canada border. Cross-border smuggling operations have significantly increased in the Canadian cannabis business, particularly since marijuana became legal in Canada in 2018. The legalization of cannabis in Canada has made it more challenging to control and stop illegal marijuana transfers into the United States, even though it is still illegal in the majority of U.S. states. Additionally, migrants seeking to flee harsh circumstances in nations like Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala have historically used the border as a site of entrance. Many Latin American asylum applicants tried to enter the United States illegally in search of more hospitable asylum procedures as a result of Trump's immigration policies that tightened the border between the United States and Mexico. These border crossings are still prohibited, even though Canada is known for being more welcoming to refugees. As a result, Canadian officials have had to modify their strategy to maintain border security without compromising their humanitarian obligations. Wildlife now faces major obstacles to unrestricted movement between the United States and Mexico as a result of the border wall's development. These walls interrupt the normal patterns of migration species, which depend on certain routes for food, refuge, or reproduction. forcing them into smaller, frequently unsustainable areas. Building walls can result in the loss of natural habitats in addition to problems with wildlife movement. For instance, trees, other plant life, and other vegetation that are essential habitats for a variety of species are removed when the land is cleared for the wall in some places along the border, because it can result in the extinction of native plant species and the fragmentation of ecosystems. This disturbance is especially detrimental to biodiversity. The development of borders has a significant impact on water systems as well. As a natural border between the United States and Mexico, the Rio Grande River is already a stressed water supply in the area. Constructing barriers alongside a river can disrupt the water's natural flow, impact wildlife and human settlements' access to water, and even make flooding worse in some places. New issues pertaining to environmental sustainability and territorial rights are arising as climate change picks up speed and the Arctic region continues to warm at a rate that is almost twice as fast as the world average. With countries like Russia, Canada, and the United States reevaluating their borders, territorial claims, and the need for infrastructure development in reaction to melting ice and expanding access to previously unattainable resources, the changing Arctic is causing enormous geopolitical shifts. Sea ice loss is one of the biggest environmental issues facing the Arctic, as it is influencing marine species' usual migration patterns in addition to rising sea levels. Seals, walruses, and polar bears are among the species that must adjust to the changing environment as a result of the melting ice. In addition to creating new shipping lanes and potential for resource exploitation in the Arctic, this ice melt also leads to territorial disputes between nations competing for access to these riches. Arctic border security is becoming even more complicated as a result of climate change. As the ice recedes and more human activity takes place in a region that was previously mostly inaccessible, nations are now attempting to safeguard their lands and natural resources. For instance, in response to the perceived security risk posed by a warming Arctic, Russia has aggressively expanded its military presence in the region by building additional military bases, airfields, and port facilities. However, this military expansion may worsen environmental deterioration, especially if it includes the construction of infrastructure in formerly undeveloped areas. The opening of the Northern Sea Route as a result of the retreating ice poses a risk to the ecosystem as well as an opportunity. Travel durations between Europe and Asia are shortened by the route. However, there is a risk of pollution, oil spills, and disturbance of delicate ecosystems. Along with these dangers, the Arctic's growing accessibility has spurred a resurgence of interest in mining and oil production, both of which have negative environmental effects. International cooperation is essential to halting additional environmental harm, as the consequences of climate change make the Arctic more accessible and exploitable. Coordination of attempts to strike a balance between environmental preservation and economic development is a key function of the Arctic Council, which is composed of 8 member nations having territory in the Arctic. However, the likelihood of conflicting territory claims and new border disputes in the region is increasing as geopolitical tensions rise, particularly in light of depleting resources. Building a border in the Arctic may have an adverse effect on the ecosystem, particularly when it comes to natural resources. The difficult balance between promoting economic growth and preserving the environment must be taken into account in any future progress in this area. In order to protect the Arctic for coming generations, sustainable methods, including clean energy and environmentally friendly trade routes, will be essential. The need for a change to more comprehensive, sustainable approaches to border security is highlighted by the environmental effects of both the U.S.-Mexico border wall and possible future border construction in the Arctic. Proponents support the employment of substitute technologies that enable safe borders without endangering the environment, such as smart fences, biometric screening, and virtual borders. These technologies seek to meet contemporary security requirements while lowering the environmental cost of border security. People rights groups and environmentalists have long demanded that border infrastructure be designed with people and wildlife migration in mind. For instance, there are requests for the creation of wildlife corridors, pathways that permit unhindered animal movement across borders. In a similar vein, environmental specialists recommend a greater focus on global collaboration and coordinated conservation initiatives to guarantee the preservation of ecosystems along border regions. International agreements that strike a balance between environmental protections and territorial interests will be necessary to solve environmental concerns in the Arctic. Making sure that commercial operations like resource extraction and shipping don't irreversibly damage the fragile ecology is the difficult part. Global policy pertaining to border construction and environmental preservation will be greatly influenced by the continuing discussion over climate change and the Arctic's future. The border between the United States and Canada is nonetheless subject to stringent security measures, even in the absence of obvious obstacles like walls or fences. The Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, collaborate closely to control and oversee the movement of persons, products, and services over the border. To guarantee that both countries can control their borders without jeopardizing the ease of trade and travel that has long existed between them, modern technologies like biometric screening, smart borders, and sophisticated monitoring systems are being used. Although the border between the United States and Canada is sometimes viewed as an example of collaboration, new tensions and difficulties have been brought about by recent geopolitical shifts and changing immigration laws. In order to preserve the open and cordial ties that have traditionally characterized U.S. Canada relations, the future of the border will probably require striking a careful balance between security considerations and humanitarian requirements. There has never been a more pressing need to strike a balance between environmental responsibility and security as the world becomes more linked. Whether they are literal or symbolic, the walls we erect have a lasting impact on our planet's future as well as the land. The world we leave for tomorrow will be shaped by the decisions we make now. What are your thoughts? Is it possible to safeguard borders while preserving the environment, or are we on the verge of irreparable harm? For more in-depth conversations on the most important topics facing the globe, please leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe.